Let's take a few moments to look at interrogative pronouns in German. What I want to do in this presentation is to look first at some interrogative pronouns in English before moving to a discussion of their German equivalent. From there, I want to talk about word order in sentences that use interrogative pronouns, and then to conclude our presentation with a review of the interrogative pronoun welch and the interrogative pronoun wer. Now, we use interrogative pronouns all the time in English. Some of the more common ones are which, when, what, why, who, and whom. Now, the last two sentences on the screen, who sees her and whom does she see, make use of two related interrogative pronouns, who and whom. Unfortunately, in English, we don't distinguish between these two forms very critically. In German, however, the distinction between these are essential. Now, the equivalent of these sentences are in German, welche Lampe hat sie? Wann kommt sie? Was machen Sie? Warum machen Sie das? Wer sieht Sie? And wen sieht sie? Now, you'll notice that as in both in German and in English, the interrogative pronouns, which I've highlighted here in German, I've highlighted here in red, they all come at the beginning of the sentence. That's because, as you'll recall from our discussions of asking, or discussion of how to ask a question in German, when we ask a question, the word order, the syntax of the sentences change. If we're asking a simple question that requires a simple yes/no answer, the verb will come in the first position. However, if we're digging for more information, we'll want to put the interrogative pronoun in the first position at the beginning of the sentence. Now, invariably, the verb will always come in the second position. Here, in this sentence, wann kommt er? When is he coming? I put the third person singular personal pronoun er, or he, in the third position. I will want to get this as close to the verb as possible. However, once I've done that, I could fill out the remainder of the sentence, the remainder of the third position, with any other information I deem useful for the question. Now, you'll recall from our discussion of the der word, welcher, that it changes, the masculine form of the der word welcher changes as it moves from a nominative to an accusative environment. The stem, the root of the der word, or here interrogative pronoun welch, in the nominative case adds an er ending. In the accusative case, it changes to add an en ending. So let's take a look at that in some examples. Welcher Tisch ist schön? Which table is beautiful? Now, I'm going to use the nominative form of welcher because I'm talking about a quality of the table, its attribute. The table isn't performing any action. Therefore, it's going to be in the nominative case. The interrogative pronoun welcher comes at the beginning of the sentence because I'm asking a question. What table is beautiful? Now, if I introduce another noun, if I introduce a subject into the sentence that performs an action, that will move the interrogative pronoun welcher into the accusative. Welchen Tisch hat er? He, or er, is the subject of the sentence, and he's performing an action. This action is reflected in the verb hat. He's having. Now, something has to receive the action of being had, and that is the table, or specifically welchen Tisch, which table. Therefore, it's going to be in the accusative case. Nevertheless, I put the interrogative pronoun welchen at the beginning of the sentence because I'm asking a question. What's most important here to notice is that there is a change in the form. Welcher goes to welchen. This same idea is also found in the way we use the interrogative pronoun wer. Now, wer simply means who. The accusative form of wer, or wen, is the form in English whom. So, let's take a look at the sentence you see at the bottom of your screen. Wer sieht sie? Who sees her? Now, I have the nominative form of wer. This is actually the subject of the sentence. So even though it is a question and the interrogative pronoun will go at the beginning of the sentence anyway, it's also the subject of the sentence because it's in the nominative case. This interrogative pronoun is actually the subject of the sentence performing the action. Who sees? Now, the noun that receives the action of being seen is sie, the third person singular pronoun. Now, I'm going to mix things up a bit and make it into an accusative. Wen sieht sie? Now, what I've done here is I've moved the interrogative pronoun wer from a nominative environment to an accusative environment. And in so doing, I've actually flipped the sentence. No longer does the personal pronoun sie receive the action of being seen, but now she's actually the one who's doing the seeing. Sie sieht. She sees. Now, something has to receive the action of being seen, and that's going to be the accusative interrogative pronoun wen, or as you would say in English, whom. So even though this interrogative pronoun in the accusative case comes at the beginning of the sentence, it has to do that because I'm asking a question. What's important to realize is that the form of this interrogative pronoun, the accusative form, indicates that it actually receives the action of the verb. Whom does she see? So in German, it's critical to note that even though we can use word order to underscore the logic of a sentence, more important is the form of the verbs, the form of the pronouns. This will indicate who is performing the action. And let's take a few moments to get to know personal pronouns in German a little bit better. This presentation is only going to focus on the nominative case. Other presentations later on will focus on accusative, dative, and genitive cases. Now, we use personal pronouns all the time in English. When you talk about yourself, I, or you are talking to your friend, you, he, she, it, those are all personal pronouns. What I want to focus on here with this slide is the way to describe the position of these personal pronouns in the language. Now, when we talk about personal pronouns, we usually describe them as being first person, second person, third person, singular or plural. Now, the concepts we want to get across here is that there are a singular grouping of personal pronouns and a plural grouping of personal pronouns. If you're talking about yourself, you by yourself are one person, you're singular. You would be the first person singular, I. Now, bring another person into this conversation. This person is in the conversation in addition to you. This is a second person in the conversation. So this person, by him or herself, is singular, but in addition to yourself is the second person in the conversation. Therefore, this person is a second person singular personal pronoun. Now, we can also have other people involved in the conversation. Let's look at third person singular, he, she, and it. Now, this refers to people that may be in the conversation but don't necessarily have to be present. You could be talking about a person who is in another class. So he is in a different class. She is in a different class. They don't have to be part of the conversation, but they are referred to tangentially in the conversation. So it's not me, it's not you, it's this other person, this third party, so to speak. So third person singular, he, she, it. Now this concept of me, you, and this third party is applicable in the singular but also in the plural. So we as a group, we the people, first person plural. Now if you're from the South, there's a second person plural concept, and that's y'all. So you're referring to a group of people in a conversation other than yourself directly. So y'all, come on by. Finally, you could be referring to a different party, a third party in the plural sense. So they, the class of 2010, decided not to come. So the concept is that we have a first person, second person, third person in singular and also in plural. Now, German has the same thing. The concepts are the same, the forms are of course different. First person singular, ich, second person singular, du, third person singular, sie, es, he, she, it. Now, we also have that in the plural. Wir, second person plural, ihr, third person plural singular. Now, whereas in English the y'all, second person plural, is something that's sort of a colloquialism. It's maybe used a lot by people in the South, but not by people from California. In German, that is an accepted form, ihr. It's used by everyone across the country. Now, there's another thing in German that's not in English that can be explained this way. This is the formal. Now, the formal address is a person that you would have respect for, but also a person that it's not one way. It's not just I show respect to a person, but what you're also doing, you're signaling that I want to have distance from you. I show you respect, you show me respect. We have a working relationship. We're not friends with each other, we are colleagues. So we have this in the singular. If you're working with a colleague at work, one person in addition to yourself in this conversation, this would be a second person singular formal. You, sir. Now the same thing is if we have the same thing in plural. If, for instance, we are presenting a paper at a business conference and there's a bunch of people in the audience that we want to show respect to, we would say you, sirs, and continue the conversation. So we have the concept of formal in the singular but also in the plural. In German, this is a frequently used form of address, Sie. What's nice is that second person formal, singular and plural, is the same in the singular and formal, is in the singular and the plural. So now, I want to sort of step back a bit and refer to a prior presentation where we talked about German nouns. We've just as a way for review here, a German noun is masculine, feminine, and neuter. And we also determine that the definite articles for these nouns reflect that gender. So a masculine would be der, a feminine would be die, and a neuter would be das. So how does that impact, or what does that fact, how does it come to bear in our discussion of personal pronouns? So, talking about third person singular personal pronouns, he, she, it, well, that is, of course, a question of masculine, feminine, and neuter, as we see in this slide. What we can do in German is we can substitute the definite articles der, die, and das with the personal pronoun er, sie, and es. He, she, and it. So, what is the benefit of that? Why should I substitute a definite article? Why should I substitute a definite article and a noun combination with a personal pronoun? And that is essentially a question of convenience. Of also language systems tend towards simplicity. People using language systems don't want to be bothered by complex rules, so there's always a tendency over time for shortening. So, for instance, you could say, das Auto ist klein. The car is small. Now, the bolded script here, das Auto, is a noun. It's also a neuter singular, so it's a third person neuter singular noun. What we can do here is substitute das Auto with es, a personal pronoun, a third person singular neuter personal pronoun. So instead of saying das Auto ist klein, so which would be 5 syllables, 1, 2, 3, das Auto ist klein, yeah, 5 syllables, we can instead say 3 syllables, es ist klein. So it's comes out quicker, it's more easy to say. I don't have to continually refer back to das Auto, das Auto, das Auto. It gets repetitive. So instead, after I establish the fact that we're talking about das Auto, from then on I could simply say es. Es ist klein. So we could use that with neuter nouns, but we could also use it with any other noun, masculine or feminine. Here we have a masculine singular noun, der Mann. Der Mann ist groß. The man is large. So again, after I've established the fact that we're talking about the man, I don't need to continually refer back to der Mann, der Mann, der Mann. I can simply say ist groß. Substitute the noun, the complete noun, with the definite article, der Mann. Substitute that with the personal pronoun, third person singular masculine, Alright, let's take a look at indefinite articles in German. This presentation is going to look at indefinite articles in the nominative and accusative cases. Now, it also indirectly builds on knowledge we developed through our presentations on definite articles in the nominative and accusative, and also our presentation on der words. So, if you feel that you need need a better grasp of those presentations, definite articles and der words, go ahead and take a look at the presentations covering those topics. So, what is an indefinite article? Well, in its basic form, an indefinite article is simply ein. It's analogous to the English a, as in a computer, a tree, a car. An indefinite article refers to not a specific instance of a noun. I'm not referring to the about. I'm not talking about the tree, a specific tree. I'm talking about, I guess, all trees, a tree. Therefore, it sort of describes this noun indirectly. It's indefinite. Now, you'll also notice on the screen that ein, that's the root, the stem, the basic stem of the indefinite article. But it also has a dash behind it. That's because the ending I'm going to put on the indefinite article requires me to know more knowledge, requires me to have more knowledge about the noun that the indefinite article modifies. Is it masculine, feminine, or neuter? Is it located in a nominative environment or in an accusative environment? So In German, the indefinite articles are ein, eine, ein. There is no plural indefinite article because that's sort of impossible to do. We can't refer to a trees or a cars. You'll also notice that the only indefinite article that actually gets an ending is the feminine nominative. The masculine and neuter don't have any endings. Now let's take a look at the indefinite articles in the accusative case. Here they are einen, eine, ein. Now you'll also notice that in the accusative, the feminine and neuter remain the same. They don't decline. However, the masculine indefinite article changes. As the noun it modifies moves from a nominative to an accusative environment, this change is reflected in the type of ending that the indefinite article takes. Now, this same pattern is something we've seen developed in our discussions of definite articles as well as der words, and that is the Oklahoma box. Everything within inside the Oklahoma box stays the same. The things outside the Oklahoma box change. So essentially, again, the only thing we really have to look at here are masculine nouns in nominative and accusative. So to summarize, indefinite articles have a root. This root is ein. Based on whether the noun the indefinite article modifies is a masculine, feminine, or neuter noun, and whether this noun is located in a nominative or accusative environment, I'm going to put the appropriate ending on. There is also, you'll notice, no plural indefinite article. And also, the masculine and neuter nouns do not take an ending. Not nouns. The masculine and neuter indefinite articles do not take an ending. So let's take a look at, we've sort of built our knowledge up, looked at the charts. Let's apply this to some real-life sentences. So, das ist eine Lampe. That is a lamp. Now, I know that Lampe is going to be a feminine singular noun. It's die Lampe. And I also know that we're in the nominative case because the verb ist, I'm talking about the lamp or a characteristic of a lamp, or I'm simply identifying the lamp as being a lamp. Therefore, there is no action performed in the sentence. So I'm going to be doing nominative case. Das ist eine Lampe. I'm going to use the nominative feminine form of the indefinite article, eine. Now, if I take this sentence and move Lampe into an accusative environment, I need to introduce another actor, someone who actually does something in the sentence. So I'm going to introduce the pronoun, the personal pronoun he. Er hat eine Lampe. He has a lamp. Now, I'm still dealing with a feminine singular noun, die Lampe. It receives the action of being had. Therefore, I'm going to use the accusative feminine form of the indefinite article, eine. Er hat eine Lampe. However, as we already talked about, it's inside the Oklahoma box, so it doesn't change. It looks the same, but actually we're dealing with an accusative form of the indefinite article. All right, well, let's make that point a little bit clearer by looking at a same sentence or a similar sentence using a masculine noun. Das ist ein Tisch. That is a table. Again, I know it's der Tisch. It's a masculine noun, and I'm identifying the Tisch, the table, as being a table. Therefore, there's no action. No person is performing something. So it's going to be in the nominative case. Therefore, I'm going to use the nominative masculine form of the indefinite article. Das ist ein Tisch. Now, I want to take this noun and move it into an accusative environment. To do that, I'm going to introduce another noun, pronoun, a person who actually does something in the sentence, and that's going to be the pronoun er. Er hat, he has. Well, what does he have? Something receives the action of being had, that is a table. Therefore, this table now is going to be in the accusative environment, receives the action of being had. Now, I'm going to reflect this change. I need to use the accusative masculine form of the indefinite article, einen. It changes from nominative to accusative. So, as a way to summarize, the basic stem of the indefinite article is ein. Now, ein will modify a noun. This noun will either be masculine, feminine, or neuter. It'll either be in the nominative or accusative case. Based on its position in this chart, is it masculine, feminine, neuter? Is it accusative or nominative? I need to tack on the appropriate ending. Again, we could also apply the Oklahoma box. Feminine and neuter nouns stay the same. Masculine nouns, or not, masculine indefinite articles will change. They will move from ein to einen. There is, as you recall, no plural indefinite articles, and also the masculine and neuter indefinite articles don't take an ending. Indefinite articles. I'm going to take a few moments now to introduce the German verb to you. There are going to be two things I'm going to be focusing on during this presentation. The first is the infinitive form, and from there we're going to move over to a discussion of present tense verb conjugations. So every verb has an infinitive form. In English, the infinitive form actually requires two components, to and then followed by the verb, to stroll, here for instance on the screen. Now what the infinitive form really is, it's just a subjectless action. There is no person here who's strolling. It's simply the act of strolling. To stroll is fun. Now German has that same concept. German also has an infinitive form. Let's look at the same verb, to stroll, but in German. That would be bummeln. Now you'll notice first thing off that there is no to. German doesn't require two components to complete or to make an infinitive form. Instead, what German has is what it calls an infinitive ending on the verb. Here you'll see it's underlined in red. It's an N. Now let's take a look at another verb, kommen, which means to come in German. Now the infinitive ending here is en. So we essentially have then two ways of forming an infinitive form. That is, either tack an n or an en on to the verb stem. So the question is, well, do I use an n or an en ending? And that depends on the quality of the verbal stem. So if the verb stem ends in an L, so if you remove the infinitive ending and then what remains, the verb stem, if that ends in an L, well then you're going to have to use an N for the verb stemming, for the infinitive form. If the verb stem ends in an M, then or anything else besides an L, then you'll simply use the en ending. Now the en ending is the standard infinitive form. The n ending is, I would say, the exception. You'll encounter more en endings than you will simply n endings. So to summarize, the infinitive form is I'll say it's the raw action without the subject, without a subject performing the action. It could either have an n or an en ending, infinitive ending, depending upon the verb stem. If the verb stem ends in an L, you'll tack on an n for the infinitive end, for the infinitive form. If it ends in anything else, here for instance it ends in an M, you will use an en infinitive ending. So I want to move now to our discussion of verb conjugation. Now what a conjugation is, it simply means that I move a verb through its different forms. So I come, you come, they come, we come, he comes. Those are all verb conjugations. German, it's a little more complicated to conjugate a verb, but they're patterns. So it's important that we master these patterns, that we memorize them, and become more familiar and confident using them. I want to take the infinitive verb form, and this is the form that you'll find in the dictionary. When you go to use a new verb and you look in the dictionary to find one, this is what you'll find in the dictionary, the infinitive verb form. So let's take a look at kommen. Now the first thing I want to do is to drop off the infinitive ending. I'm going to either drop off an en or the end. And this will isolate the verb stem. Now, once I've isolated the verb stem, what I want to do is I want to tack on the appropriate ending. So this requires me to know, well, am I using the first person, second person, or third person singular? Or is it plural? So the standard endings are, as you see on the screen, E, S, T, T, E, N, T, E, N. So what you get is essentially, if we look at the next slide, Ich komme, du kommst, sie, es kommt. I am coming, you are coming, he, she, it are coming. In the plural, wir kommen, ihr kommt, sie kommen. That is sort of the standard way of conjugating the present tense verb. Now, of course, in German there are always exceptions, as in any language. Let's take a look at two of those at the present moment. Now, I have the verb stem find here. Now, the infinitive form is finden, which means to find. I notice that, or you'll notice that the verb stem ends in a D. Now that's sort of problematic if I have a third person singular ending that ends in a T. Findt. Or if I'm using the second person singular du. Du findst. It's hard to pronounce. So essentially this exception is trying to make the verb more pronounceable. So it's an exception, it's something to remember, it's an extra work that we have to do, but in the long run it's trying to make life easier for us. So if the verb stem ends in a D or ends in a T, what I want to do in the second and third person singular, well, on the screen it's the things that are marked in red, are plural second person. I want to insert an extra E between the verbal stem and the verbal ending. So what I get is Ich finde, which is normal, du findest, which is changed. This is so much easier to pronounce than du findst. Du findest. Sie, es findet. Wir finden, ihr findet, sie finden. So, if it ends in a D or ends in a T, I'm talking about the verbal stem here, we're going to have to insert an extra E in the second, third person singular, and second person plural. Let's take a look at another verb, tanz. Tanzen is the infinitive form to dance. Now, again, it's simply trying to make life easier for us by making the verb more pronounceable. If the verb ends in a Z, or if it ends in an S or an SZ, an SZ is that funny looking B, we're going to drop off the S ending. And I'm specifically, the only change that's affected here is the singular, second person singular, du. So instead of having du tanzt, I'm going to simply have du tanzt. So what we get here is Ich tanze, which is normal, du tanzt, which has the S dropped off, and then everything goes back to normal. Er tanzt, wir tanzen, ihr tanzt, sie tanzen. Now, there's one other thing that I want to address, and I want to include it here because this is one of those high frequency verbs that that we use. I don't think we'll get to it for a little bit, but it's so important and we use it so frequently, I think that the sooner we address it, the better off we'll be. And that is the verb to be, the verb of being. In English, we also have we have an irregular conjugation of the verb. I am, you are, he, she, it is. English is a Germanic language, German is a Germanic language, so it's going to have that same difficulty. It's an irregular verb. So we're going to have to memorize this, but once you get it down, you'll use this all the time. Ich bin, du bist, sie, es ist. Wir sind, ihr seid, sie sind. So memorize this, and this will be something that you will use frequently. I am tired. I am bored. I am interested. All right, in this presentation, I want to take a look at accusative prepositions. Now, what I'm going to do is do a very brief review at the beginning of the presentation and look at definite articles. You'll recall that those are der, die, and das, and look at how the definite articles change from when they move from a nominative to an accusative environment. Because we're going to see the exact same thing with the accusative prepositions today. They will certain prepositions will force nouns, definite articles, indefinite articles, all of those to assume, will force them into an accusative environment, and they will be declined as accusative objects. From there, we're going to look at some examples before we end with a overview of the accusative prepositions themselves. Accusative prepositions are simply things that you have to memorize. It's a short list. Think of a mnemonic device that works best for you to get them into your mind. We'll go over a few of those in class, of course, but find out something that works for you, and eventually, once you memorize it, it becomes second nature. Now, you'll recall that definite articles in the nominative are der, die, das, die. In the accusative, they're den, die, das, die. Now, we've talked numerous times about the Oklahoma box, that definite articles, indefinite articles that are inside that box do not climb. They don't change as they move from a nominative to an accusative environment. The only thing that we really have to look out for are masculine singular nouns, essentially der, and der will change to den. So, for instance, we have the sentence here. We have a subject, ich. What am I doing? I'm hitting something, ich schlage. And then we have the masculine singular noun in the nominative, der Stuhl. Now, der Stuhl receives the action of being hit by me. Therefore, it's going to go from der to den. Ich schlage den Stuhl. Now, the noun here is forced into the accusative by the subject of the sentence, ich. The subject is doing something, he's hitting something, and the accusative object receives this action. That isn't necessarily the case with accusative pronouns. Let's take a look at this sentence here. Ich gehe den Stuhl. I'm going around the chair. We have a first person singular personal pronoun in the nominative. It's the subject of the sentence, ich. Now, this ich is doing something, he's acting, and that is essentially ich gehe, I'm going, I'm walking, I'm ambulating. I'll explain that in a second why I use that word. So it's what we call a intransitive verb. There's no action that is being transferred to another object in the sentence. You can't say, I go the chair. So I'm simply, it's intransitive, no action is being transferred. However, I do have this accusative preposition. Ich gehe den Stuhl. So I'm going around. So in this case, it's not the verb that impacts the noun, but it's actually the preposition which forces it, as you'll see on this slide, into an accusative prepositional phrase. So everything between the preposition or around to the first noun that it modifies, den Stuhl, is going to be thrown into an accusative prepositional phrase. And since it's going to be an accusative prepositional phrase, of course, the object that it will modify, der Stuhl, as you see in this slide, will have to change into an accusative object. So, what prepositions do, accusative prepositions, it's generally, it's not the verb that affects the noun. Like I mentioned before, you can't say, I go the chair, ich gehe den Stuhl, but it's the preposition that affects the noun. And it'll force everything between the preposition, between the accusative preposition and the noun that follows it into an accusative prepositional phrase. And as you see on your screen, der Stuhl will have to become den Stuhl. Ich gehe den Stuhl. I am circumambulating the chair. I'm walking around the chair. And the same thing with this next example. Ich gehe der Garten. Now, ich gehe again, I am circumambulating. Circumambulating what? Der Garten, the garden. Again, it's a masculine singular noun, and for this presentation I'm only using these because it shows very distinctly the change from der to den, the accusative. Der Garten would have to go into, you guessed it, ich gehe den Garten. I am circumambulating the garden, walking around the garden. And not in the sense that we would say in English, I'm strolling through the garden, I'm walking through it. The garden is the focal point, the center around which I walk. Ich gehe den Garten. Although you could probably also imply a sense of strolling through it. So, the accusative prepositions are the ones you see on your screen. Durch, für, gegen, ohne, Durch means, of course, through. Für, for. Against, ohne, without, and then the ones that we've seen before, around the time or a place. I'm coming around 6 o'clock. Ich komme at. Actually, I'd say come at 6 o'clock. Ich komme ich komme 6 Uhr. I come at 6 o'clock. So anyway, these are the accusative prepositions. Memorize them, and after a while they become second nature. Accusative prepositions.
Welcome to German Grammar Videos. Thank you for watching. This presentation will examine how to use coordinating conjunctions in German. The presentation will first examine the use of coordinating conjunctions in English, focusing on how coordinating conjunctions are used to create compound structures and to join sentences together. Then the video will move over to an examination of the German coordinating conjunctions und, oder, denn, aber, and sondern, before concluding with examples of how these conjunctions are used in sentences. Let's get started. On the screen you see two simple sentences. The first sentence, I speak English, contains one subject, a first-person singular personal pronoun in the nominative case, I, the first-person singular present tense form of a verb, speak, and a direct object of that verb, English. A direct object is simply a noun or pronoun that receives the action of a verb. The second sentence, I speak German, manifests the same syntax, although the direct object of the verb, German, is different. Indeed, the first two elements of the sentence are syntactically equal. That is to say, the subjects and verbs of both sentences are exactly the same. As the first two elements of the second sentence are the same, we could merge the two sentences into one by removing the redundant elements and joining the direct objects with a coordinating conjunction, and. This creates the compound direct object you see on the screen. We can also use coordinated conjunctions to join complete sentences. Although the two sentences you see on the screen do not have any syntactically equal elements besides the subject I, the ideas presented in the sentences work together to create a sense of contrasting exception. That is to say, the subject of the first sentence is perhaps hungry and would like to eat breakfast, but the unusual exception of having to take a test prevents him or her from doing so. It is important to note that the two sentences work together to create the sense of contrasting exception. We can strengthen the sense of contrasting exception by joining the sentences with the coordinating conjunction but. As you see on the screen, a tighter integration of the contrasting ideas presented in the two original sentences is afforded through the use of this conjunction. The two original sentences now function as independent clauses in a single sentence. It is also important to note that a comma follows the first independent clause and precedes the coordinating conjunction. German also relies on coordinating conjunctions to connect words, sentences, phrases, or clauses. The conjunctions you see on the screen are those that are most frequently covered in introductory German courses. Und is equivalent to the English and, oder to or, denn to for, because, and since, aber to but, though, however, and sondern to but, instead, rather. The difference between aber and sondern will be covered in more detail at the end of this presentation. But first, let's take a closer look at how these conjunctions function in German sentences. As in English, the coordinating conjunction und, and, can be used to simplify sentences where there is syntactic equality. The two sentences you see on the screen, a translation of the sentences from the beginning of the presentation, share the same first-person singular personal pronoun in the nominative case, ich, and the first-person singular present tense verb, spreche. As these sentence elements are syntactically equal, we can remove the redundant elements and join the remaining direct objects with a coordinating conjunction, und. This creates the compound direct object you see on the screen. We can also use und to join two sentences as a means of providing additional information. For example, the second sentence you see on the screen, sie möchte mitkommen, she would like to come with, provides additional information to the activity described in the first sentence. Er geht ins Kino. He is going to the movies. When und is used to join these sentences, the connection between the ideas they express is made even more explicit. It is important to note that, as in English, the resulting sentence manifests two independent clauses, which are separated by a comma preceding the coordinating conjunction. It is also important to note that the syntax of the second independent clause is not altered in any way through the use of the coordinating conjunction. That is to say, the third-person singular present tense modal verb möchte, would like, retains the second position in the sentence following the subject. This is the same syntax that was found in the original sentence. This is a characteristic of all coordinating conjunctions. They do not alter the syntax of the second independent clause. The coordinating conjunction oder or, is used when presenting alternatives. These alternatives can be in the form of words or independent clauses. For example, in the sentence you see on the screen, spricht er Englisch oder Deutsch? Does he speak English or German? Oder is used to form an alternative between the language that the subject speaks. Both languages are the direct objects of the verb spricht, and therefore form a compound direct object that is comprised of two words and a coordinating conjunction. Oder can also be used to present alternatives between activities expressed in two independent clauses. The first independent clause, gehst du ins Kino, are you going to the movies, forms the first alternative, and the second independent clause, bleibst du zu Hause, are you staying home, presents the second alternative. Be sure to note that both clauses, which are questions, have a second person singular present tense verb in the first position. As you recall, German forms questions through the use of interrogative pronouns, such as wer, who, and by putting the verb in the first position at the beginning of a sentence. The coordinating conjunction oder, therefore, does not alter the syntax of the second independent clause. The coordinating conjunction denn, for, because, since, is used to express a causality between two independent clauses. For example, the first clause, sie trinkt viel, she drinks a lot, is further modified by the second clause, which gives the reason why the subject is drinking so much. Sie hat Durst, she is thirsty. The coordinating conjunction denn is used when the causality between the two clauses is less necessary, and the function of the second clause is to introduce helpful but possibly more parenthetical information. The subordinating conjunction weil, although having the same meaning in English as den, implies a more strictly necessary condition between the two clauses. The coordinating conjunction aber, but, however, is used to express a contrast or an exception. As you see on the screen, the conjunction can be used to merge two apparently contradictory adjectives, klein, small, and stark, strong, to express the idea that the subject of the sentence, despite his small stature, possesses a remarkable physical strength. The merging of these two adjectives creates the compound predicate adjective on the screen. Of course, the same idea could also be expressed in a longer sentence that relies on two independent clauses instead of a compound predicate adjective. Er ist klein, aber er ist stark. He is small, but he is strong. Finally, it is important to note that there is a difference between aber and sondern. Although both could be translated as but into English, sondern has the additional meaning of rather, instead, and on the contrary. The coordinating conjunction sondern is used to provide contrasting and corrective information in the second clause, and can only be used when a negative element such as nicht, not, nie, never, or kein, no, is contained in the first clause. For example, the sentence you see on the screen, Ich gehe heute nicht ins Kino, sondern ich lerne Deutsch. I'm not going to the movies today, rather I'm learning German, contains two independent clauses joined by the conjunction sondern. The first clause contains the adverb nicht, which negates the activity of the subject going to the movies. The second independent clause provides contrasting corrective information as it explains that the subject will instead be studying German. And that concludes this presentation on how to use coordinating conjunctions in German. The German Grammar video series is produced by David Neville, Associate Professor of German. The videos, scripts, and lecture slides are released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share Alike 4.0 International License. Don't be a square. Remix and share.
Today we're going to take a look at German coordinating conjunctions. Specifically, what we're going to do is, in this lecture, begin, as we usually do, with an example in English, where we take two separate sentences and join them together into one sentence by means of a coordinating conjunction. And then we're going to look at a similar example in German. The first example we'll look at is two sentences that have the same subject and joining those sentences. And then we're going to have a brief example of two sentences with different subjects and joining those together by means of a coordinating conjunction. After that, we're going to take a short look. We're going to take a look at a short list of German coordinating conjunctions. There's about 5 of them. 2 of them sort of represent difficulties for students, and those are aber and sondern. So we're going to be taking a closer look at those, how they differ and when do you use them. And then at the end we're going to sort of synthesize our knowledge into a list of 2 rules, a short list of rules governing coordinating conjunctions. So beginning first with an example in English, we have essentially, it could be a situation, a same situation, although I'm using 2 separate sentences to describe it. I sit on a bench, I read a book. Now, even though if I say these sentences to you as they are displayed on a screen, you would understand what I'm doing. It nevertheless sounds kind of simple, right? I sit on a bench, I read a book. Since it's the same situation, I could, or could I not, bring those sentences together so that it's the same situation and the same sentence. And we do that by means of a coordinating conjunction. So, for example, I sit on a bench and read a book. Now, what I can do in this sentence here is, since I am the subject of both sentences, I sit on a bench and I read a book, when I bring the sentences together and join them by means of a coordinating conjunction, I can drop out the subject in the second sentence because it's redundant. It's understood from the beginning of from the sentence before. So I sit on a bench and read a book. What does it look like in German? So, ich sitze auf einer Bank, ich lese ein Buch. Again, we have sort of the same situation, but I'm using the same example, the same situation as described in the English example. It's one situation, but I'm using 2 separate sentences to describe it. So, ich sitze auf einer Bank, ich lese ein Buch. It sounds sort of clunky. It would be much nicer, it would flow much better if we were to take these sentences which describe the same situation and put them together in the same sentence. And we can do that, as we did in English, by means of coordinating conjunction. Ich sitze auf einer Bank und lese ein Buch. As in the English, I removed the redundant subject because we've already established who's doing the action in the prior sentence. Now, if I have a sentence, however, where there's 2 separate subjects, like this one right here, ich sitz auf einer Bank und Thomas liest ein Buch, then I'm going to have to retain that second subject in. But otherwise, everything else sort of remains the same. So, what are the coordinating conjunctions? There's essentially about 5 of them. And actually, some of them are very close to English. Und, and, oder, or. It gets a little bit difficult with aber and sondern. Aber meaning but, however. Sondern also meaning but sort of with the meaning of rather or on the contrary. And I'm going to take a look at these in greater depth in just a second. And then finally we have denn, which means because or for. It sort of has a softer, more of a causal sense than weil in German, which also means because. But at this moment, let's take a closer look at aber und sondern. Now, the first sentence is groß, aber schlank. He is large, but slender. So we're still, basically we have two complementary ideas. That he's a tall person, he's a large person, and he is also, but also he's slender, right? One doesn't negate the other. So there's two characteristics that describe this person. However, the second sentence, ist nicht groß, sondern klein. The first part of the sentence, the first clause, is negated. It's negated by either by a nicht or a kein. In this instance, it's negated by nicht. So we're saying that he's not large, but rather he's small. So essentially, what the second sentence is doing, ist nicht groß, sondern klein, is presenting two mutually exclusive ideas. He's not large, but he's small. Whereas the first sentence with aber is there two complementary ideas. He's large, but he's also very slender. So, and that sort of highlights the difference between aber and sondern. Now, the main thing that we need to know with, or the main things we need to know with coordinating conjunctions, two central rules. Coordinating conjunctions, when you use one, they don't affect the word order of the sentences that are joined. The verb will still remain in the second position. When we do our exam, when we have our lecture on subordinating conjunctions, you'll see that the word order is affected. And then finally, each sentence can essentially stand independently of the other. So I sit on a bench, I read a book. Essentially, they're two independent sentences that make sense by themselves. So that's it on coordinating conjunctions in German.
I'm going to take a few moments to talk about negation in German. I'm going to look at nicht and kein, and we're going to see that we could use nicht with predicate adjectives, adverbs, and entire clauses, whereas we're going to have to use kein only with nouns. I'm also going to do a brief review of the indefinite article ein, because its pattern of declination is the same as kein. So, negating predicate adjectives. What you have on your screen, das Auto ist schön, is a basic German sentence. We have the subject in the first position, das Auto, the verb ist in the second position, and schön in the third position. Das Auto ist schön, or the car is beautiful. Now, schön, an adjective, comes at the end of the sentence. It comes after the verb, which makes it a predicate adjective. Now, a predicate adjective still refers back to the subject of the sentence at the beginning of the sentence, but it is separated from this subject by a verb. Now, if I want to negate this idea that the car is beautiful, how do I go about doing this? Where do I go about inserting the nicht? And the answer to that question is I insert nicht right before the predicate adjective. Das Auto ist nicht schön. The car is not beautiful. Now, cars do other things besides manifest beauty, and for instance, they drive. So, das Auto fährt schnell. We have a subject in the first position, a verb, a different one in the second position, fährt, and an adverb in the third position at the end of the sentence. Now, das Auto fährt schnell. The car drives fast. Now, schnell is an adverb and not a predicate adjective because I'm not modifying the noun directly. I'm not saying the car is fast. Rather, I'm saying the car drives fast. So schnell doesn't modify the noun, it modifies the verb. It describes the manner in which the car drives fast. However, even though I'm dealing here with an adjective, or excuse me, with an adverb, I could still negate it in the same manner. Das Auto fährt nicht schnell. The car does not drive fast. Now, if my friend is buying the car, kauft das Auto,
How do I go about negating that idea, the fact that he's buying a car? The answer to that question is I want to insert the negation at the very end of the clause. Kauft das Auto nicht. He's not buying the car. So, by way of summary, if I am negating a predicate adjective, the negation comes before the predicate adjective. If I'm negating an adverb, again, nicht will come before the adverb. However, if I'm negating an entire idea, an entire clause, nicht will come at the very end of the clause. Now, so far in this discussion, we've only looked at predicate adjectives, adverbs, and entire clauses. What if I want to negate a noun? In order to do that, I'm going to have to use the negative article kein. But before I do that, before I look at kein, I want to look at the indefinite article ein. And that's because kein is very similar to ein. In fact, it manifests the same pattern of declination. Now, you'll recall that the indefinite article ein simply means a, or one. And it manifests the following pattern of declination that you see on your screen. Everything essentially stays the same in the feminine and neuter, in both nominative and accusative, whereas ein in masculine changes to einen in accusative. The indefinite article ein doesn't have a plural form. However, if I want to use a negative adjective kein, I can negate plurals. I will have keine in both nominative and accusative. However, kein manifests the same pattern of declination. We're still dealing with the same Oklahoma box. The appropriate form of kein will depend on the type of noun it modifies. Will it be masculine, feminine, neuter, or plural? Will it be nominative or accusative? Now, kein simply means no or none. So, for instance, ist das ein Tisch? Is that a table? If I want to negate the fact that that's actually a table and is something else, I will change ein into kein. Das ist kein Tisch. That is no table. Now, if I am dealing here with, if I deal with an accusative environment, if I want to have an accusative direct object in the sentence, I will also change kein. Hat er einen Tisch? Does he have a table? If I want to negate this sentence, I simply change einen into keinen. Er hat keinen Tisch. He has no table. So, for summary, if I want to negate a predicate adjective or an adverb, I use nicht before the predicate adjective or an adverb. If I want to negate an entire clause, I put nicht at the very end of the clause. However, if I want to negate a noun, I will use the negative adjective kein, and I will put that right in front of the noun. Kein has the same pattern of declination as ein, and requires me to know whether the noun that it modifies is masculine, feminine, neuter, or plural, or whether it is nominative or accusative.